Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Ethan, and if you're here, chances are you probably already know who I am. But on the off chance that you don't, my name is Ethan Barber, and I am a local New York City archival and architectural photographer. I have been a photographer for over 15 years at this point, and I have been capturing New York City for just about a decade now, which is really crazy to me when I say that out loud. I'm like, really? Has it been that long? Just a little bit about me. I'm actually from just across the river in New Jersey. I was born and raised just an hour outside of Manhattan, and I had the privilege of coming into Manhattan over the years as a kid, quite frequently actually. Pretty much every Christmas I can remember as, all the way back till I was like down here. I have memories of coming into the city and, just being completely in awe of the buildings that surrounded me. And so, I never really knew at a young age that I wanted to be a photographer and that I wanted to capture the city. It just sort of happened naturally. I got a camera for my birthday, and I began to take photos, and I was always drawn to still life. And over the years, that sort of evolved into, architecture and just really being drawn to how natural light and seasons and different times of day can really affect the way that buildings look and the beauty about them. And I think you can see, I'm paranoid that it's not working. Okay, great. But just an example of some of my work from the past, that I've done. And you may be thinking, okay, this is great, but how did you get into video? And that's a great question. About 2 years ago, I found myself very burnt out when it came to photography. Just the sight of my camera, for whatever reason, kind of made me a little nauseous and made me not really want to pick it up. And I sort of had to come to terms with that. And I didn't really know what that meant. I thought maybe I had ridden this wave for as long as it was. And around the same time, Instagram rolled out a new feature called Reels, which, if you're not familiar, is basically just TikToks with a different name. And when it first rolled out, if you are an Instagram first creator like myself, we didn't really know what to do with it. And I thought, well, I don't dance. I'm not going to do my skincare routine. And I'm from Jersey. I go to Dunkin' in the morning. I don't have coffee shop recommendations. So I was trying to figure out what I would do with this. And I was burnt out with photography, and Instagram was really trying hard to get me to, thank you. No. I was like, wow, okay. No, but they just, were really encouraging creators to produce video content. And so I was trying to figure out what that meant for me. And so I thought about how I would share my photography. And I always would post in sets, whether that was a set of 2, 3, or 5 images. And those photos always told a story, whether it was a story of a season or a story of a street corner and how, people moved, excuse me, how people moved in and out of that street corner. They always came together and spoke. And so I thought, okay, this is great. So what if I use Reels as a way to kind of take a photo carousel and make it come alive? So I began to shoot videos in the same way that I would do my photography. And I sort of created this different style where I treated, short form content as a photo carousel that moved. And I thought of the scenes that I would capture in photo form, and I thought, well, instead of, I'll take a photo, but then right after, what if I capture it in 2 to 3 seconds, and I allow the scene to really come alive? And you're still freezing a moment in time, but you're allowing it to breathe. And thank you. This is a great crowd. And so, just really letting those images, they are videos, but to me, they're moving images. And they really speak on their own when you allow them to. And so I started doing that. This is an example of some more recent work that I've done. Obviously, in the beginning, they did not look like this, but after a lot of practice and figuring out how I wanted to proceed, they sort of evolved into this. And, branching into video as a photographer was something that I really didn't want to do in the beginning. And in turn, I get to speak in front of you today here at B&H at the Bild Expo, and I think that's really awesome. So that covers to what are we going to talk about today? Well, today we're going to cover how to capture better video with your iPhone. Before we get started, I do want to make a disclaimer, and that disclaimer, oh wait, is this a remote? I don't have to come over here. Okay. Sorry, I've been rehearsing with my phone, but I found out I can't use my phone because I have no service. So I'm going to use this. Let's see if it works. Disclaimer is that this talk is going to be geared towards iPhone users. However, if you don't shoot with an iPhone, a newer iPhone, or if you shoot with, a Samsung Galaxy or a Google Pixel, the same general tips and tricks will apply across most devices. And I'll try my best to call out what features are iPhone specific. So if you're having trouble, following along, hopefully that can help clear it up. Did that work? Great. So the first part of today's talk is why video. So I think it's important to note right off the bat that just by nature, video is more likely to capture your attention when it's put side by side with static content. Now, that does not mean that video is more valuable than your photography, especially if you're a photographer first. Your photography will always retain its innate value. But when you're sharing it online, especially on platforms like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, you're sharing on platforms that support both motion and static content. And by nature, any type of motion is immediately going to draw your eye, and you're just kind of fighting a losing battle, competing for that attention. Now, I want to look at some data. This is from a study found from the Social Insider blog that ran from January 2022 to May 2023. So it just wrapped up a few months ago. And they analyzed over 7 million Instagram posts, and they looked at 3 key metrics that I want to point out to you today: engagement, reach, and impressions. So the first one we're going to look at is engagement. Now, engagement is how many times someone likes, comments, or shares on anything you post. And you can see on the green column that Reels have on average a 1.25% engagement rate, whereas a static image doesn't even have 1/3% of the average engagement rate on social media. When you look at reach, which is how many times your post has been seen by an individual user account, you're going to see that Reels by far take nearly 30% of the average user's following, whereas a single image doesn't even hit 15%. And then when you look at impressions, which is how many times the content has been seen overall, so this includes if someone has seen your content multiple times or if it's shared to a story, you can see that divide gets even greater, with Reels reaching nearly 35% of the average user's audience, and an image still can't even reach 15%. That sucks. Again, I want to reiterate, your photography is no less valuable if you decide to shift your focus into video. They go hand in hand, and I can't iterate that enough. You can use video as a tool to help you reach more people and help your work find the audience that wants to see it. The last thing I want to talk about is, okay, you understand why video, but why should you use your iPhone versus your traditional camera? Now, I'm sure a lot of you being photographers have probably invested quite a lot of money when it comes to your camera, and it's your baby, just like mine is. And, why would I want to use my iPhone, right? This seems like it would be the inferior device to my camera. Well, it's important, and you can absolutely use your camera if you want to, but I would encourage you for 3 reasons of why I prefer to shoot with my iPhone versus a traditional camera. The first is convenience and portability. So I've been up here for, I think, close to 10 minutes now, and this phone has been with me. This is a demo phone, it's not my real phone. But for all intents and purposes, this is my phone for the next 30 minutes. And this has been with me the entire time. My camera is safely in my hotel room because I didn't feel like carrying it and lugging it with me here today. This phone is so portable, it goes with you everywhere. Whether I'm going to the movies, if I'm going to the gym in the morning, or if I'm going to a restaurant in the afternoon for dinner. Your phone is always with you. They've become an extension of us. And you always have it ready to go no matter where you are. Next, we talked about this briefly last night, but quality and versatility. Mobile devices, especially newer ones, have gotten so good that it is nearly indistinguishable to tell apart footage shot on an iPhone versus a traditional camera. Now that being said, I'm sure if you looked at the raw footage side by side on an amazing 8K monitor, you could absolutely tell the difference. But just because you can does not mean that the iPhone footage is somehow less valuable. The storytelling is what makes your content and your video and your photography valuable, not the tool that it was shot on. And the third point being app integration and sharing. So when you choose to shoot with a mobile device, specifically a phone, when you capture video on that device, it's ready to go the second you stop recording. It's ready to edit, it's ready to share, and it is ready to go, and you don't have to do anything else to make that happen. All right, how's everyone feeling? Woo! So I'm gonna try to go slow. I have a couple friends here in the front row who know to give me the little, if I'm going too fast. But the first thing you're gonna wanna do is open your settings app on your iPhone. And you're going to want to go until you see camera, and you're going to want to go in here. Now, before we adjust anything, I want to just talk about what we're about to do. So we're going to optimize our camera for the best settings for shooting mobile video with the intention that this video is going on social media, so short form content. The tips we're going to cover are what I find are my ideal settings for sharing. If you're shooting, for Vimeo or YouTube and you want a higher resolution or you have a very, specific usage, this might not be the best tool, but if you're just getting started, these settings are going to be a great way for you to get started and have, really good, clean, crisp video when you're ready to share. Okay, so we're in camera, we're in settings. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to format. So in here, you're going to see two options for camera capture. The first is high efficiency and most compatible. Now, the way to explain this in the most simple of forms is this is the type of file format that your video is going to be recorded in when you press record. So high efficiency is a special file format that will allow you to record the highest quality video. This allows you to do really cool features like HDR, cinematic, and other types of filming in the smallest file size possible. So in a way, it's kind of like a pre-compressed format without losing any of that quality. The most compatible format, however, is a MOV format, which is interchangeable with an MP4. And it is one of the most compatible, it's in the name, it's one of the most compatible video formats that, all devices, legacy devices, social media networks are gonna be able to recognize and work with the most easily. So for all, for purposes of this talk today, I highly recommend that you shoot in most compatible. Now there is a caveat to that, which is if you're shooting in most compatible, the file size of your video is going to be significantly larger. So if you're able to, I recommend upgrading your iCloud storage or cloud storage so that you can store this footage. If you don't have that ability, you can shoot in high efficiency, but I'll offer some reasons why I don't think that's the best idea. Next, you're going to see some options to toggle on and off photo capture in both Apple ProRAW and Apple ProRes. So we're just going to talk about ProRes, but ProRAW refers to photography. And basically, this allows you to toggle on the option to then turn on Apple ProRes, which is a special format by Apple that allows you to use the iPhone's full sensor when recording video. Now, if your end result is social media, it's kind of overkill if you're just shooting short form content or behind the scenes of what you're doing. But if you have uses for footage that is, massive and at its absolute fullest resolution, then you can absolutely turn that on. But it is a bit overkill for social, so I recommend going ahead and leaving that turned off. Next, we're gonna go back and we're gonna go to record video. That's the second option here. So in here, you're going to see a bunch of resolutions and frame rates. This is where we start to get very subjective. For me and for the type of work that I do, I recommend capturing all video at 4K at 30 frames per second. Now, frame rates are a hotly debated topic, and I'm not going to get into it today. Maybe in the Q&A we can, but for all intents and purposes, I recommend 4K at 30. And the reason being that all social networks, specifically for short form content, recommend that you upload your footage in 1080p at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now, if you're shooting in the most compatible file format, you can capture in 4K at 30 frames per second, and these apps are gonna know how to reduce and compress that footage with the minimal amount of compression. So this will basically allow you to take higher resolution, and then it will compress when you go to upload, and you don't have to really do a lot in between capturing and posting. Again, you absolutely can, but if you're just starting out, this is a great place to start so that you don't have to think so much between recording, editing, and sharing. Below that, I do want to call out enhanced stabilization. This is a newer feature on the iPhone 14 Pro models. So if you don't have that phone, you might not see this. You're not going to see this in your settings. But basically this is, if you have it, you can turn it on and it adds an extra layer of stabilization. It basically just slightly zooms in on all your footage and just adds an extra layer so that what you're recording is going to be as stable as possible, but it doesn't remove that beautiful handheld romance when you shoot without, a gimbal or a tripod or a mount. The last thing I want to talk about in here is if you look a little lower, you'll see HDR video, which is in parentheses, high efficiency. So this video format, if you're a photographer, you're probably well aware of HDR, which is high dynamic range. It's the same concept just for video. You can absolutely turn this on if you want, but if you want to turn it on, you have to shoot in high efficiency mode. As a subjective opinion, I think it looks terrible when it's posted online. Instagram, I believe, is the only app that currently supports HDR video, and not all devices support it, which means if your device supports it and it looks good to you, great, but think about all the other people viewing it who don't have that support on their device, or their network settings are, poor, you're here today and you don't have Wi-Fi, whatever it is, and it ends up looking really crunchy and, in my opinion, terrible. So we're gonna go back again. And under here, there's one more thing I want to call out, and this is preserve settings. So in here, we're not going to go through all of these. And again, I'm so sorry for the people in the back because I was back there earlier and I couldn't see anything up here. But I encourage you later to go through and read what each of these are, sorry. When you are shooting with the native camera app on the iPhone and you close it and then you reopen it, it will automatically default to the original settings. This preserve settings feature allows you to handpick which features you want to lock in place so that when you come back to the camera app, whether it's an hour or a week later, those same settings will be set and saved for you, so you don't have to keep redoing them every time you open the camera app. So yeah, I encourage you after this, later today, to go in and just check your preserve settings and see what makes sense for the type of video you want to capture. Below that, in composition, I like to keep my grid turned on. So in here, this helps me compose my shots, especially when I'm filming video. It just puts a very subtle grid over my camera, and it allows me to frame, especially if I'm moving along slowly with my scene or whatever, I can kind of keep it aligned and composed. Below that, you're gonna see photographic styles. So when you open this is if you wanna add presets to your phone before you begin shooting. I don't use these because I like to have full manual control over any color grading I do. The majority of the time, I usually will make like a small tweak or something. If I shoot and the white balance is just a little too cold or a little too warm, I like to do those manually. But in here, you can choose between different modes, add contrast, you can make it more vibrant, you can add warmth, etc. But again, for preference sake, I prefer to keep those turned off. Once you get more comfortable, shooting, you can by all means experiment and try to turn those on and see what works great for you. So these, I'd encourage you, if you want, take a photo of this. It's a very brief recap of what we covered. So in here, basically just recapping, these are my ideal settings for social media. This is what I recommend, and this is what I use for everything that I capture. 4K at 30 frames per second, shooting in most compatible, which is an MOV video format, HDR, cinema mode, ProRes camera styles, all turned off until you are ready to use them or you have a purpose for them. And then I also like to capture directly in the native camera app on my phone. All right, so now we're gonna talk a little bit about capturing quality video. So we talked a little bit about the iPhone itself and getting it set. So now you're ready to go out and shoot. So I added visual aids, so hopefully it's a little easier to follow along. But I shot 2 clips here, and the first thing I want to talk about is stabilization. So the clip on the left is a clip. I was out on a walk in the park, and I took a quick clip of one of my favorite spots in Central Park. And you'll notice that it's a little jittery. I wasn't really careful with my movement, and I sort of just took my phone out, and I just shot, and I didn't think about it. The clip on the right, however, was after I looked back at the clip, and I thought, oh, that was good, but I could have done better. And I turned around and I braced myself and I made sure I was, standing firm, and I just ever so slightly moved. as I was filming the scene. And it's a subtle difference, but you can see that the clip on the right, it feels so much more romantic, and it allows your eye to focus on the scene, and you're not distracted by jittery, sudden movements. It's kind of the same thing in photography, where you want to make sure, if you're shooting in a low light setting with a very slow shutter speed, that you're not moving and you're braced so that you don't get a blurry photo. Next, my font changed. Interesting. I will be having a conversation with someone after this. Anyway, so we have framing and composition, N. So the clip on the left is a clip that I shot on the same walk in the park, and I loved it. These two women had just set their picnic blanket down. I thought it was a beautiful scene, and I captured it, and then I walked away, and I looked at the video again, and I thought, it's really bugging me how the top of the building is getting cut off. So I turned around, I took a few more steps back, and this time I thought about the composition of the scene. And I really loved how the branch kind of reached over the building, and I allowed them to come into the scene, and it kind of creates this beautiful heart-shape effect, framing the building and really drawing your eye to what's happening. And I also gave a little bit more room to the women so they're not just like jammed into the bottom of the composition of my frame. They have room to have their picnic, I have room to have my shot, and it just taking a few extra seconds to think about the scene and how it looks after I leave allowed me to get a much more compelling shot within 2 minutes. The next one is lighting and exposure. So hopefully the screen shows it. It's a subtle difference, but the clip on the left is what my iPhone thought was the ideal lighting for the whole scene. Now, I'm shooting in a very high contrast mode. You can see the sun is setting, there's a bright light coming in, the trees are very dark, and my phone was struggling to know what was the ideal lighting for this scenario, right? So I looked at it and I thought, that golden summer sunlight looks yellow, it almost looks white when I'm looking at it on my phone, it's like blown out. And I just felt like a lot of detail was coming in through the trees that wasn't really necessary for the shot. So I reshot it about 30 seconds later, and all I did was lowered the exposure 2 steps, which you can do 2 ways. One, you can lower it using the exposure tool in the camera app, or you can just tap on your screen and drag your finger down, and that will help you lower the exposure as well. And you can see by doing so, and it wasn't a lot, because you don't want it to look like nighttime, but it was just enough to allow the scene to get darker, to allow that bright sunlight to really read as beautiful and golden. It toned down some of the shadows so you can really just focus on the movement and you're not distracted by things like blown out light. The next thing I want to talk about is movement. Now, this isn't necessarily a before and after, but if you're just branching into video, especially if you're so used to taking photos, this was something that I wish someone explained to me, but I had to figure out on my own. And that is how my movement affects the storytelling that's happening. Now, this is the exact same intersection. Fun fact, that's actually, the clip on the right begins with Casey Neistat going by on a skateboard. If I ever meet him, I'm gonna tell him, I'm like, I have a video of you. But the clip on the right, is that the one that's staying still? I'm like, okay, good. Okay, the clip on the right is what I labeled static, and the clip on the left is what I labeled dynamic. And basically, it's the same south-facing view of Mercer Street. It's one of my favorite streets in Soho to capture. I mean, look at it, it's beautiful. And in the dynamic movement is where I ever so slightly moved across the intersection with my subjects. And I allowed people to kind of follow me. They came in, they moved out of the frame. You can also see that you really get a sense of depth in that with how the buildings are, and you really understand just how long that street is. The clip that I've labeled static is where I braced myself in the center of the scene, I held my camera still, and I allowed people to come in and move out as they wanted to. It kind of forces you to pay attention to the people rather than being overwhelmed by the movement in the scene. Both of these clips have, I think have served their own purpose and are, they tell different stories, but it's the same scene. Now you may be thinking, okay, Ethan, that's great. What about audio? Well, I'm glad you asked. I don't really use audio that often in my work. When I'm capturing these clips, I'm thinking of them more as photos that move, and audio is always a second thought for me. Recently, I've enjoyed bringing in audio to my edits just to add that extra layer to really show people what New York actually sounds like. There's a misconception that it's just endless sirens and people screaming, but in reality, especially if you're not in a touristy part of town or if you're in a residential area, it's actually quite quiet and beautiful, and it's, there are sirens, don't get me wrong, I'm not lying, I'm just saying, if you're not on 34th Street, it's actually not that chaotic 24/7. But it is important if you're capturing content where you have a subject, say you're filming me today, or whatever, you want to make sure that I'm coming through clearly. And I keep touching this. So you want to make sure your mic isn't covered. On iPhones, the microphone is on the bottom in these little dots here, depending on your model. Sometimes it's on the back. You want to identify the device you're shooting with, figure out where that microphone is, and make sure you're not covering it. Otherwise, your audio is going to sound like that. Well, that was okay. That went way better in rehearsals when I didn't have a mic on. The next thing you want to do is avoid loud environments. So again, I'm out on the streets of New York almost every day capturing photos and video, and it's unavoidable to avoid a loud environment, whether that's a friend standing next to you talking loudly about their day at work, or that's a siren going by. My best advice is to either wait until that passes, or if you can, maybe move yourself to an area, if it makes sense for the shot, where it's not so loud. Or if you can't do that, you can always get an external microphone, plug that in your phone, and that will help you isolate the sound as well. Other techniques you can implement are things like slow motion and different frame rates, time lapses, parallax, more dynamic movements. I'm sure some of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, and some of you maybe not so much. That's okay. I would love to go in depth on these, but again, for time's sake, we can't. But there are countless ways once you kind of get your footing that you can really make video come alive. You can also implement things like external equipment. So whether you want to use a gimbal or a stabilizer, I think the number one question I get asked, and I'm not even kidding, I feel like I sound like an ass when I say this, but I think I get asked this at least 5 to 10 times a day, is do you use a gimbal or stabilizer? And the answer is no. I've learned how to brace myself and move incredibly slowly. I mean, I do it. And it just comes natural. I've practiced for years, and I don't do that. I also think there's a beauty in handheld movement when you're recording video. You can also use things like tripods or mounts. Again, depending on what you're capturing, that might be an amazing tool to help you achieve that. You can also get things like lens attachments for your phone. If it exists for a camera, at this point in time, it already exists for your phone. You just have to find out who makes it and where to buy it from. The last thing I want to talk about briefly is editing and exporting. I would love to spend more time on editing. However, I only have 15 minutes left and we still have a Q&A, so I'm like, ooh. Editing is the first one. This is a beast. This was the thing I absolutely hated the most when I started doing video. I still don't particularly love it today. If you were here for Jenna's talk, you also know that post-production is the bane of her existence as well. But if you're just getting into it, you can use one of the leading video editing apps for mobile is CapCut. If you are in the Adobe suite, you probably recognize Premiere and its mobile counterpart, Premiere Rush. And if you want to edit on the go, you can use other apps like InShot, Splice, Video Leap, LumaFusion. Some of them are also available for iPad if that's your preferred method. And I encourage you to do some research and figure out which editing app makes the most sense for you. Some of them utilize AI, so all you have to do is upload clips, put in audio, and it will automatically sync for you. Other ones have incredible features and ideal export settings. So here, I went on Adobe's blog and I pulled these for you. Again, yes, I encourage you to all take a photo of this. This comes directly from Adobe's blog. I have my little high school link at the bottom to prove that. But we have ideal export settings for social media, which is an MP4 format. And again, that's interchangeable with an MOV format. AAC audio, 3,500 kilobits per second bit rate, 30 frames per second, 1920 by 1080, an H.264 codec, which is just standard, and a maximum of 90 seconds long. Now, some platforms will allow you to upload longer videos. Some have limited it to 60 seconds. So it really just depends on the season or month that these apps have. But for the most part, you should be good if your content is 60 or 90 seconds or less. Okay. The last thing that I would love to leave you with today. Everything I've talked about is what I learned, and I'm self-taught on a lot of this. When I first started doing video, I leaned in and I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials, I looked at other creators, and I tried to figure out what made sense for me. And what I'm sharing with you today is the ideal settings that I have and what has worked for me over the last 2.5 years at this point. And I'm incredibly happy that I get to share that with you. But I would encourage you to take what, hopefully you've learned something, take it today, whether it's, an hour from now, it's later tomorrow, or this weekend, or in a month. Take what you've learned, figure out how to make it your own, figure out how to, just branch off of it, because what I do is optimized for what I do, which is short form content. But it might not be the ideal settings for every other thing. But yeah, I just would encourage you to experiment, and yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we do have time for some questions. We have, I'm so sad that my font didn't load, but that's okay, because Helvetica's great too.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I just actually want to make a quick statement and a thank you for sharing all this to everybody. Real quick, my name is Nita. I'm actually from Nashville, and I do this full time. My work's been on BET Soul, CMT music videos with just the iPhone. I shoot with only my iPhone. Shot over 400 plus clients in only 3 to 4 years, and I live in a high rise in downtown Nashville. To give anybody hope in the room, you can make this into a career.
That is incredible.
Joke. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I need to get on your level. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question, because you said you started with your camera, but then you were like, I don't want to look at the camera anymore. And now you said you have it at the hotel. So I wonder, nowadays, what do you use the camera for?
So I use my, thank you for asking. I actually really love that question. There was a point I was supposed to say, and I forgot to say it, but basically, I think that when I started doing photography is what allowed me to branch into video. It wasn't effortless, but it seems effortless looking back. But in turn, by embracing a new way of storytelling, it actually made me a better photographer today. And thank you for pointing that out, because it's a great way to close the loop. I would say probably about 6 to 8 months after I started really going heavily into video, I started to have a newfound love for photography again. So I still use my camera solely for my photography, and I use my iPhone solely for video. To me, I see them interchangeably, and it's not like I can't shoot a photo with my phone or vice versa. But yes, I'm back to shooting photos quite regularly. This photo slide, most of those photos were all taken within the last, I think, like 8 months to maybe a year. But yeah, no, video is actually what helped me get back into photography. But yeah, thank you for asking that. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Did you happen to come across any new updates regarding the algorithm? Because they change every 3 months, competing with TikTok. Your analytics over there mentioned Reels being over carousels, but I heard rumors that carousels may be making a comeback. I was just wondering, since you're up on the stage,
Yeah.
you probably might know something that we don't.
No, I wish I did. Honestly, I would be like, NDA, don't tell anyone. But no, I wish I did. I do know that briefly over the summer, I'm speaking just from my personal experience, so please don't quote me on this. From my personal experience, photo carousels were being pushed on on TikTok, and then Instagram was pushing video, and then they kind of swapped back and forth for a minute. And so right now, it's hard to say. Right now, it kind of seems like video is still just, by far, no matter how you slice it, is always just going to be pushed, which, again, it sucks if you're a photographer first or if you're a stills creator. It's a losing battle. I wish I had a better answer, but yeah. One thing I will say, though, just adding on to that, is that if you are a photographer and you're not utilizing TikTok as a platform for your photography, you are missing a huge market. I have had photo carousels hit over 1 million views. Not that the views matter, but when you post your stills, all you have to do is just add a track. I always recommend trying to find something that matches the vibe of the story you're telling. Like, I wouldn't use Ice Spice for one of my reels. I love Ice Spice in my free time and at the gym. However, I don't think deli would really work with my photography. So just like, just keeping in mind, like, you can use TikTok as a platform. You can only post photos on there too. You don't have to post videos there. And I think a lot of times it gets a bad rep, just because everybody thinks it's, just dancing videos. But there is a whole community on there that will embrace your photography. And all you have to do is just post there, copy and paste your caption, and connect with so many more people. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go off on my... Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Over here.
Thank you for saying that, especially because I'm a little bit older and I feel like TikTok is like kind of irrelevant, but it's not. It's like definitely not.
Yes.
I just don't like kind of crossed that yet, and I think that leads into my question is maintaining relevancy. What are your tips for maintaining relevancy? And then a quick question: could you keep your slide about your export settings up?
Oh, yeah.
I know some people in the back definitely wanted to look
Is
at
that
this.
good?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's funny because I don't think I'm relevant at all, so it's funny you asked that. I honestly, I'm a bridge between millennial and Gen Z. Not wanting to share too much personal, but I was born in 1995. So I lean more millennial depending on the day, and then I also will lean more Gen Z. So it just depends. But I think when it comes to relevancy, the key, and maybe this isn't the best answer, but it's the best I got, I would say is to not focus so much on the relevancy, but rather, it sounds so cliche, and I'm like, is there a better way to word this? But to focus on what you love to do and what inspires you, and to share that. Algorithms now, while they kind of suck, I acknowledge that, they also can be a powerful tool to help you reach the people that will also love what you love. So especially a platform like TikTok, where I'm a huge Swiftie. I had to say that at some point. I've been to the Eras Tour. It was amazing. But again, my For You page is 95% Taylor Swift. I'm not kidding, because that is something that I love so much. And yes, that's nothing with what I do, but it's because it's what I engage with and, the community that kind of comes in. And, to remain, quote unquote, relevant in that sense, I would say to stay relevant with your audience and to find the audience that wants to see what you have to share, because that is the foundation for growth. So hopefully that, okay, good.
Hey, what's going on?
Hello.
Hey, so my name is El Ray. I'm a Latin artist, and I appreciate the tips that you gave. I post a lot of content, but sometimes I struggle with organizing all the ideas that I have. Do you have any tips on organizing your content? With a content calendar, do you use that? Or any tips regarding that?
Yes, so thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
So for me, it really depends if I have, I try to stay away from a lot of brand deals and sponsorships. Obviously, I've done them. And when I have them, I will build, scheduling around what I have. But for the majority of what I share, I don't use a scheduler. I do use Later. I have worked with them in the past. I'm not being paid to say this, but I actually like using that tool a lot, and getting to work with them was amazing. But Later Media is a scheduling and tracking kind of tool. It allows me to review my analytics and sort of see, down to an hour of, when is my audience active? What are they engaging with? What do they want to see? So for me, I don't like to plan out too far in advance, because I feel like that can allow your, what you're sharing to get stale. And I'm always out shooting on a daily basis. And when I capture something, usually I love to edit and post in the same day. So it's, and obviously now, if you're familiar with my work, you know that mentally I'm already in November. But it's one of those things where I don't like to plan out too much, because again, as we talked about with the algorithm earlier, it's changing daily, it changes weekly, and you kind of want to adapt to that as you go. So hopefully that, okay, good. Hello.
Hi. So I'm a photographer, but I teach a lot of people of all professions and ages about photography and to some extent video. And the biggest question I get asked by people who are especially not professional in our space that are using phones is storage. And could you just speak about you said getting
Yeah, of course.
and whatever you prefer.
Yeah, so I will say this, I do have a 2 terabyte iPhone, so that is a level, I guess you could call it storage privilege. My Gen Z really came out. But basically, I do have a phone with an insane amount of storage. My perspective on that, and again, I know that it's not accessible to everyone to pay for the most expensive phone, is that, for me as a creator, it's the tool that I use every day. Again, my phone is with me no matter where I go, so I'm fine to invest a little bit more in it every single year to get that maximum storage. As an alternative, before I upgraded my phone, I think I had like a 128 gigabyte iPhone before I started doing video. And I pay monthly, I pay $32 a month to have Apple One, I think it's called, where you get 2 terabytes of cloud storage. And what that does is it takes older videos and it basically compresses them, uploads the original file to iCloud, and it stores like a compressed version on your phone. So if you need to access it later, you can download the full res, it's in your library, but it saves storage space as well. There are also a bunch of amazing, platforms out there, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive. I don't like Google Drive, but whatever. iCloud, there's so many platforms that you can use. And if you want to archive, I think it's great to take all of your footage by the month and dump it. Even if you have the ability to buy an external hard drive, you can get a 4 terabyte, 5 terabyte external hard drive for around $100, which again, I know might not be accessible to everyone, but if you can, that's a great way for you to kind of archive footage, by the month or by, however you want to do that, so you can reference it later.
Hi, first of all, I
Hello.
really love your work.
Thank
you.
you.
So much for sharing your videos. I have a question regarding editing in terms of colors.
Yes.
If you have any recommendations, because I've been struggling, I post a lot, but I've been struggling with getting the right colors, and every time I use a third apps, I feel like I'm losing quality.
Okay. So I use, this is where it kind of gets a little counterintuitive. When I'm posting my content, I created over 20 Instagram effect filters, and I usually use a handful of those, one per video because you can't use multiple, but out of the 20, I use a handful on a rotation. And basically, I upload the raw clips from my phone to Instagram. I edit in Instagram. It's how I learned. Leave me alone, I know. And I apply one of those filters on top of it. Those filters I created based off of just, as you saw with my photography, I've been manually editing my photos. I do it by eye. I've been doing it for years. So I created presets, which I also sell. Shameless plug. But I turned those into Instagram effect, I think they're a cube file. And so I use those to color grade all of my footage when I post. I do have a couple cubes that I use. I think they're called cubes. Again, this is where you're gonna start to be like, does he know what he's talking about? When I'm doing client work, I do have a couple presets that I use in Premiere that I apply that are based off those that I just kind of converted. Thank you. I just love this. So when I'm color grading my footage, if I'm doing it on my phone, I usually will make small tweaks directly in the Photos app. Again, if the color is too light, you can make manual edits. Don't tell Apple I said this, but the iPhone editing, internal Photos app editing kind of isn't the most amazing. So what I would recommend is if you have an app, when you're exporting the footage, you can either export it at the ideal export settings, or if you just want to color grade individual clips, export those as the same resolution, so the maximum resolution you can, and then edit them as a clip, and then do that and see if that helps. Hello.
So she kind of stole my question, so I hope this isn't too repetitive.
No, that's okay.
But when posting and making video montages for TikTok, would you recommend using CapCut for the text on the videos and Premiere for the lighting editing, or is there a different combo?
So that's a great question. So I think CapCut is a great app. I have not used it that often, so I don't want to speak too much to it. For all of my text on my videos, they're all from Instagram. Again, don't tell TikTok this, but I just download them through a third party and I repost to TikTok. So if you're editing for TikTok first, I would say definitely either use CapCut, or if you want to use Premiere or Premiere Rush, edit your video in there, and then you can upload directly from there. most social apps, this gets more into social conversation rather than video, but most apps recommend using their own built-in text apps. So sometimes I've also posted a video with the Instagram text and then sometimes with TikTok's in-app text because they have SEO readers when you share, which is search engine optimization. And it will actually recognize that you're using an in-app font, and it might, like, there's no data to back this up. They all are like, yeah, we don't do that. But they give you a little algorithmic boost, if that makes sense. So I recommend doing text in the app you're sharing with, but for your actual editing, I think you would be fine with CapCut.
All right, if you guys have any more questions, there's going to be a table right outside the hallway. Well, one last question, but then please, if you have a question, line up outside the table for the meet and greet, and Ethan will go over there.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. My question is, can you please share the third-party app that you were talking about to download from TikTok and then when you repost it to Instagram?
Yes, so I didn't put it in here because it kind of looks like spam, and I didn't want anyone to accidentally click an ad and get hacked. But I think it's Snap Insta. I'm not gonna be able to pull it up. I think it's called Snap Insta. It's on, like, if you just Google, really you can just Google third-party Instagram downloader. Basically, if the video is not private, if it's a public video, it will download the highest resolution available with the copyrighted audio. And you can literally take that file in its highest resolution. It will be the compressed version, but then you can cross-post that. I believe it's called Snap Insta, like snap.insta. But if you Google it, you should be able to find it. No, you're okay.
Do you use it through the website or through
Yes.
an app?
Like, I go through Safari on my phone.
Okay.
Also controversial, not Google Chrome.